In just 72 hours, 27 U.S. Air Force C-17 Globemaster 3 cargo planes punched through Ukraine's skies. Not over weeks, not even days, but 3 intense nights of nonstop landings. To Moscow, it was a direct strike on a region they thought was untouchable. To Europe, a flashing red alert that war is now at the doorstep. And to the world, it was proof that this war is far from forgotten. Washington calls it routine logistics, but the speed, scale, and secrecy tell a different story. What exactly did the U.S. deliver? Why was it done under the radar? And if this signals a shift in the war, what is the world about to face? Let's uncover the truth. The unseen landing. Under a pitch-black sky, with no reporters nearby and no live streams running, 27 United States Air Force C-17 Globemaster 3 transport planes landed in Ukraine, one after the other, for 3 straight nights. There were no news crews, no flashy speeches, just the deep roar of jet engines slicing through a silent farmland, and the flashing runway lights cutting through thick mist. As each massive aircraft came to a halt, its tail ramp cracked open with a hiss. The steel cargo deck tilted downward, and pallet after pallet rolled out onto flatbed trucks, even while the pilots kept the engines running. Forklifts moved like shadows in the dark, echoing against the cold metal. Each plane finished its entire drop in under 10 minutes. Then it was gone, taking off again before the sun could rise. And by the time morning came, the sky over Ukraine was quiet again. But nothing about the operation was routine. It was a punch, delivered fast and hard, in a place Russia never expected. To understand just how powerful that punch was, let's break down the numbers. A single C-17 can carry about 170,900 pounds of cargo. That's roughly 85 short tons. Now multiply that by 27 planes. That's over 2,300 short tons of equipment, gear, and supplies. To put it simply, in just 72 hours, Ukraine received more cargo than what the first U.S. airlift into Kyiv delivered in an entire month back in February of 2022. Civilian flight watchers were actually the first to notice something strange. Tracking websites lit up with flight paths showing a cluster of military planes, each using the call sign REACH, leaving Ramstein Air Base in Germany and Naval Station Rota in Spain. But just as they neared the Carpathian Mountains, they all disappeared from radar. Their transponders were switched off. About 2 days later, those same call signs showed up again, heading back west. It looked like a quick-turn shuttle pattern. And the timing? It lined up perfectly with a brief pause and then sudden restart of Patriot missile deliveries that Washington had announced on July 9, 2025. For people who track these kinds of flights for fun, there was no doubt something huge and extremely urgent was heading east. Why all the urgency? Because Russia's war supplies are drying up fast. A report from the Kyiv School of Economics in June said that Russia's reserve stockpiles have dropped by nearly half since they invaded. It's gotten so bad that they're now bringing old T-54 tanks from the 1950s back into action. They're even asking other countries for ammo. Analysts from the Royal United Services Institute say Russia has already received as many as 5.8 million artillery shells from North Korea. That's a lot of firepower. But it also shows that Russia's home supply is nearly gone. Washington saw a window of opportunity here. deliver everything fast, before those foreign shells could hit the front lines. But it wasn't just about weapons. This was also a psychological strike. During the chaotic evacuation of Kabul in August of 2021, everyone saw the C-17s airlifting people to safety. News crews were camped on the runway, and every takeoff became a global event. This time, silence was the strategy. Flying at night, landing at hidden strips, clearing out before any satellites could swing into position. It turned the entire airlift into a message. The United States can show up inside the battlefield faster than the enemy can even post about it online. For Russian commanders already nervous about drones that see through smoke or missiles that strike from beyond the horizon, the idea that 27 massive planes could sneak in and unload that much gear without getting caught was enough to seriously shake them. All of this, of course, hinged on one aircraft, the C-17. It first saw action back in 1995 during NATO's Bosnia mission, called Operation Joint Endeavor. This jet was made for this kind of work. It can land on dirt runways just 3,500 feet long, carry an M1 Abrams tank or 18 cargo pallets, and then take off again at about 500 miles per hour. Its crew of just 3 can reverse it down the runway under its own power, spin it in place, and close the doors in minutes. That's exactly why it's the go-to plane for the Air Mobility Command, and why this mission pulled it off like clockwork, even on a Ukrainian farm field that wasn't marked on any public maps. Inside NATO, the reactions came fast. Officers in Brussels started whispering that this quiet operation meant the end of slow, hesitant aid. If Washington could send 27 of these planes through risky skies without needing fighter escorts, then clearly the old rulebook was out the window. Meanwhile, some Russian analysts described it to the Financial Times as a stealth strike on rear areas, admitting that depots they once considered safe no longer feel untouchable. For American voters tired of political gridlock, the grainy clips, shot on cell phones, of those big gray tails slicing through fog said what press releases couldn't. When the U.S. wants to act, it can move with jaw-dropping speed. But cargo weight and camera angles only tell half the story. Military experts say surprise itself is a weapon. By skipping the media hype and making this airlift feel more like a covert operation, U.S. planners turned simple crates into mind games. Now Russian units have no clue what might appear next, or where. And Ukrainian soldiers? They feel something real backing them up. Because when those ramps dropped open, Washington's promises turned into steel and wheels. This kind of tactic even has a name: cognitive maneuver. It means forcing your enemy to defend everywhere at once because they have no idea where you'll hit next. But here's what really keeps Moscow awake at night. These planes don't just carry boxes. They often transport things like giant fuel bladders, mobile radar towers, and even the people who operate them. No official has said who, if anyone, stepped off those ramps. But seasoned logistics experts recognize the pattern. When you land C-17s in a cluster, what usually follows is the quick setup of fuel stations, communication towers, and perimeter security. And if that happened here, if those Ukrainian strips now have fresh concrete and secret infrastructure as satellite images seem to suggest, then the map of this war just changed for good. Exactly 72 hours after the first wheels touched down, the final jet lifted off and disappeared into the night sky. By that time, every last piece of cargo was gone. The airstrips were camouflaged, and Russian spy drones were left circling empty runways. What came next was dead silence. No photos, No press conferences. Russian TV pundits were furious, demanding answers. European papers ran bold headlines like, "The night the front moved." Back in Washington, a press secretary tried to downplay everything as routine logistics. But no one in Kiev, Warsaw, or Berlin bought that for a second. That leaves one last question, and it's the one now echoing through every war room from Moscow to the Pentagon. What exactly was inside those crates? And did anyone step off those planes with it? Inside the cargo, nobody standing near those fog-covered airstrips could see what was inside the C-17s, but everyone was desperate to find out. Within hours, leaked cargo manifests started making the rounds with reporters. The contents were not just supplies. They were tools of a modern, high-tech war. We're talking about 30 Patriot PAC-3 missiles, more than 8,500 155mm shells, over 250 GMLRS rockets, and 142 AGM-14 Hellfire missiles. And all of it was loaded, landed, and gone again before sunrise. On paper, it might not look like much, but in reality, this was the tightest, most advanced cluster of U.S. firepower ever flown directly into a live battlefield. And yes, those numbers seriously matter. Over 8,000 artillery rounds are enough to keep one Ukrainian battalion firing for nearly 2 full weeks. Right now, their average rate is around 650 shells per day, way lower than in 2023, mostly because they've learned to hit smarter, not harder. GMLRS rockets, for example, are GPS-guided and can strike a 43-mile target inside a 30-foot circle. Just a few salvos can wipe out a Russian ammo dump without a single soldier leaving cover. The Patriot missiles, now fully restocking previously rationed systems, protect the skies after January's massive drone wave. Meanwhile, those compact Hellfire missiles, fired from Mi-17s or even off trucks, give Ukrainian troops a serious tank-busting punch. But here's what makes this shipment different. It's what didn't show up on the headline lists. Hidden under heat-resistant tarps were M982 Excalibur Block IB shells. These aren't regular artillery rounds, they're laser-guided and deadly accurate. Back in Iraq, Excalibur shells hit their targets on the first shot 92% of the time and often landed within 13 feet of their aim point. Ukraine has been using them already and found that accuracy saves lives. With Excalibur, their gunners don't need to stick around to adjust fire. They shoot once and get out fast. According to Pentagon analysts, this kind of precision has cut Ukrainian casualties by double digits during artillery duels, and Kyiv keeps asking for more of them for exactly that reason. But hitting your target isn't enough if you don't know where the target is. That's why a batch of truck-mounted Iris-T SLS air defense launchers came along for the ride. Germany has already sent 7 full Iris-T systems to Ukraine. These systems combine medium and short-range launchers into a single network that talks to itself. The short-range trucks can hide in forests, launch 2 missiles in under 4 seconds, and vanish before Russian radar even knows they were there. The airlift didn't just deliver missiles, it brought in the eyes and teeth to hunt with them. That includes Phoenix Ghost drones, each weighing about 100 pounds and made by Avex Aerospace. After a new Pentagon order in March 2025, production ramped up fast. The newest version, called the Dominator, can fly for up to 300 miles and carry a 37-pound shaped charge. These drones are perfect for hunting high-value targets like S-400 radars or idle Russian bombers. Ukrainian drone operators, many of whom started with DIY quadcopters, now call these drones silent hammers because they circle high above the clouds, totally unseen, before plunging down with deadly force. But boxes alone can't fight a war. You need people to link all these systems together. And while the US hasn't said much publicly, small teams of American Special Operations advisors have been rotating in and out of Ukraine since late last year. You won't see them on camera, no unit patches, no interviews, but they're there to make the hardware work. They bring encrypted radios, networking routers, and secure software keys that allow a drone operator to guide an Excalibur shell in real time. The Security Assistance Group Ukraine says that today, 90% of baseline training happens inside Ukraine, led by Ukrainian instructors, with US teams just there to certify and help troubleshoot. This keeps everything fast, local, and directly tied to the front line. We've already seen how this new approach plays out. On June 1st, 2025, Ukraine launched Operation Spiderweb. Using drones, precision rockets, and satellite tips in perfect sync, they shut down 3 Russian S-300 air defense sites, without sending a single jet across the line. European newspapers called it a ghost strike because Russian crews never even saw it coming. Social media lit up with photos of burned-out launchers still pointed at the sky. The operation proved that with the right software and coordination, a medium-sized military can knock out a superpower's airspace, at least for a night. For Washington, it was the clearest sign yet that their advisor and algorithm strategy actually works, and a hint of what this latest cargo delivery might achieve next. And this airlift even helped with systems that haven't entered the fight yet. In Arizona, at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base, old F-16 jets are being pulled out of storage and rebuilt with new radars, rewired electronics, and brand new wings. The war zone confirmed that the first 2 left the boneyard in May, heading for a depot in Poland. That's where Ukrainian pilots will join them after their training wraps up. The plan is to field a full combat-ready squadron by early 2026. Until then, parts from these restored jets are keeping Europe's donated F-16s running and ready, so no jet stays grounded longer than 48 hours. Some critics argue that shipping more advanced tech just makes the war spiral faster. And that's not wrong. Every new Patriot battery forces Russian jets to fly lower, putting them in range of shoulder-fired missiles. Every time Excalibur strikes, Russian artillery has to move farther back, losing accuracy. And every Phoenix Ghost launch makes Russian radar crews nervous, pushing them to switch on their tracking systems, just in time for GMLRS rockets to find them. It's a vicious cycle. The faster the loop spins, the easier it is for someone to misfire or cross an invisible line. But for soldiers on the ground, the math is simpler. If one guided shell can destroy a threat in a single shot, that's fewer shells raining back at them. If a loitering drone can drop right into a tank's hatch, that saves an entire unit from risking their lives on foot. And if a trained contractor can replace a burned-out Patriot transmitter on the spot, the skies over Odessa stay safe, even if the spare parts are 600 miles away. In just 3 nights, Ukraine didn't just get boxes, they got a total system upgrade. Missiles, smart shells, drones, mobile launchers, radios, training kits, advisory teams, each one acting like a new piece of software, working together to make Ukraine's military fight faster, smarter, and more connected. What we don't know yet is how Russia will try to block this system, or how far the US is willing to go to keep it patched and running. The cargo was real, the firepower undeniable. But where did it all land? Airstrips in the fog. No one saw a single jet on civilian radar. Yet just 3 days after the American airlift, Signs of where those C-17s landed began to surface. Satellite watchers digging through Sentinel-2 images spotted something unusual. 2 quiet airstrips in Ukraine were suddenly showing signs of life. One was just 9 miles west of Poltava Air Base. The other sat on the edge of Vinnytsia. Both had new slabs of concrete, fresh JP-8 fuel bladders, and mobile control towers tucked under netting large enough to cover the tail of a Globemaster. These photos confirmed what many had suspected. The C-17s from earlier didn't land at major airports. They used a hidden network of remote runways built for one reason: to keep weapons, fuel, and people moving fast, even when Russia thought they had all the routes mapped out. Building something like this during an active war isn't improvised. NATO has had the blueprint for decades. They call these quick-build hubs AFARs, or Advanced Forward Arming and Refueling Points. A NATO study in 2024 showed that when fighter jets operate out of these mobile bases, they can cut their turnaround time by half because everything they need, fuel, bombs, data, is already there, packed in modular boxes. Ukraine took that same playbook and rewrote it for cargo missions. A C-17 lands, drops pallets of fuel, radar, and forklifts, then takes off again. But what it leaves behind is a fully operational microbase. Connect 3 or 4 of those, and you've got a mobile logistics spine, one that can grow, bend, or vanish depending on where the front line is moving. But speed isn't enough if you can't protect what you're building. That's why each node in this growing network has layers of defense. The outer ring includes NASAMS systems from Norway, now synced up with Ukraine's own radars using a new command center unveiled in June. Inside those rings, there are Ukrainian-operated Iris-T launchers and even custom hybrids, Soviet-era gun mounts fitted with Western tracking systems. Open-source analysts nicknamed one of these the Raven after a test video leaked in May. What ties all of them together is a shared data link. So if a drone slips past one system at 3 miles, it shows up instantly on a different screen 20 miles away, giving another battery a clean shot before that drone gets close. If something does get through, backup arrives fast. The U.S. 173rd Airborne Brigade, based in Vicenza, Italy, is NATO's designated 15-hour quick response unit. During an exercise called Swift Response 25 in Lithuania, American paratroopers were seen training side by side with Ukrainian scouts, practicing ambush tactics using FPV drones. These QRF teams now rotate through month-long Guardian deployments at the new hubs. They're equipped with enough troops and armored trucks to secure a crash site or repel a surprise Spetsnaz raid, buying time while command figures out the next move. The math behind this setup is brutal, but it works. A Pentagon mobility report from May 2025 showed that getting equipment from the Polish border to the front line by rail takes around 48 hours, and that's without drone attacks on bridges. But a C-17 landing at the Vinnytsia site can have its cargo in an artillery unit's hands by the next evening. That time saved means faster resupply, faster medevac, and more impact on the battlefield. Even NATO insiders, who are nervous about pushing too far, admit that the efficiency is hard to argue with. Keeping all of this under the radar is its own battle. During exercises in the Philippines in 2024, the U.S. Marines tested a new tool, a tablet that shows every radio, radar, and jammer as a colored aura on the screen. If someone's giving off too much of a signal, the operator can spot it instantly and turn it down or switch frequencies. According to sources in Kyiv, that exact software is now running on rugged Android tablets scattered across the logistics spine. If a Russian spy plane starts sniffing for electronic signals, these devices can spot the spike before a big radar picks it up and shut things down before they're detected. But all of this, the fresh runways, the fuel bladders, the radar systems, isn't just about tactics. It's about strategy. Every new hub pushes Ukraine one step further away from being a country that receives help and closer to becoming a country that launches its own operations. If Russia hits one of these sites, they're admitting it matters, which means Ukraine will rebuild it, and the US might defend it. But if they ignore it, then Ukraine keeps gaining ground. Either way, the cost of ignoring the logistics spine just keeps rising. Russian media has already labeled the system an American dagger. But their generals understand the real problem. They now have to spread their missile coverage not just over major cities like Kyiv, Lviv, and Odessa, but across dozens of hidden strips that stretch from the Dnipro River to the southern forests. That stretch thins out their firepower and gives Ukraine more room to plan. For Ukrainian logisticians, the people keeping the army moving, it's a game changer. Before, replacing a HIMARS engine meant sending it on a long, dangerous trip across the border and back. Now, they can forklift the part off a C-17 pallet and install it in under an hour. Medical teams are seeing the same change. Field hospitals that used to take days to reach can now fly in and start treating soldiers within the golden hour, the critical window when lives are most often saved. Some critics worry that each new slab of concrete pulls the U.S. deeper into the war. Supporters argue the opposite, that this entire system is designed to avoid a direct fight. It spreads out, stays hidden, and keeps Ukraine fighting without forcing NATO into a headline-grabbing standoff. Either way, one thing is clear. Russia's assumption that the U.S. would never plant physical infrastructure inside Ukraine, that's gone. Still, for all its impact, this whole forward spine barely exists on paper. Most maps won't show it. Fuel lines vanish into tree cover. Radar towers disappear under camo nets. Jet tails blend into farmland. Radio discipline keeps the airwaves quiet unless a threat appears. Its best defense is doubt. A Russian planner looking at an open field doesn't know if it's empty, or if there's a missile battery hidden behind that ridge, waiting for the first movement in the sky. By the time satellites catch a glimpse of new concrete, it's usually too late. That hub has already served its purpose and maybe popped up again 2 valleys over. That agility makes it more than just a logistics system. It's a moving shield, and with every mile it shifts east, Russia's safe zone shrinks, and Ukraine's room to maneuver grows. That's the quiet revolution happening right now, and it's what sets the stage for the final shift we'll explore next. The point of no return. Washington keeps saying that the United States isn't at war. It's just helping a friend defend itself. But what's happening on the battlefield tells a very different story. This isn't distant support anymore. It's something much more connected and much more involved. When American systems find a target and Ukrainian teams strike it just seconds later, it doesn't feel like advice. It feels like a shared operation. No, there aren't U.S. combat troops out front, and officials still deny any direct involvement. But the deeper you look, the more obvious it becomes that this goes far beyond crates of weapons and polite words. The tools flowing in, data links, secure radios, and targeting software, blur the line between giving help and actually being part of the fight. And every time those tools work, Washington slides a little deeper into the heat. That's why different governments are reacting in very different ways. In Berlin and London, the message is strong. Keep arming Ukraine and don't ease up on Moscow. Germany just did something it hasn't done since World War II. It stationed a permanent combat brigade in Lithuania to reinforce NATO's eastern edge. Chancellor Friedrich Merz has also backed Ukraine's right to strike deep inside Russia and promised more defense spending to match. The United Kingdom is pushing hard too, teaming up with Germany to get more air defense missiles to Kyiv and urging other allies to speed up deliveries. But in France, the mood is more cautious. President Emmanuel Macron keeps warning that one wrong move could spark a wider war. He still supports Ukraine, but he's also trying to keep the door open for diplomacy, even while agreeing to stronger action. So on paper, NATO is united. But you can feel the tension. Some countries think escalation will scare Russia off. Others are afraid it might do the opposite. At the United Nations, that divide becomes a dead end. The Security Council keeps meeting, arguments flare up, and then nothing gets done. Russia uses its veto every time to block any resolution about the war, which pushes everything over to the General Assembly, where speeches pile up but have no real power. Countries like Brazil, India, and South Africa, who tried to stay neutral, are now openly warning that turning battle zones into launch pads could backfire. But they can't make anything stick without the Security Council, so the result is all talk and no action. Meanwhile, Moscow isn't waiting for permission. Russia has doubled down on drones, both by building them at home and importing designs from Iran. Investigations show that Iranian experts are helping set up local production inside Russia, and the results are visible every night in the skies over Ukraine. At the same time, European governments are reporting a spike in cyber attacks, GPS jamming, and sabotage attempts. All tactics meant to mess with Ukraine's allies without crossing NATO's red lines. This is how Russia pushes back, through deniable digital strikes and drone swarms, not tank columns. And as all this unfolds, NATO itself is shifting forward. Deterrence is no longer just a policy. It's a physical line moving east. Germany's deployment to Lithuania is one example. So are the new long-range missile and air defense setups across Europe. Russia already sees the US missile systems planned for Germany as a direct threat. Sweden and Finland are now full NATO members and are flying joint missions over the Baltic Sea. Russia's northwestern corner, once more isolated, is now surrounded by a growing air net. Budgets are rising too. More than half of NATO's members have hit or passed the 2% of GDP defense spending target. And now there's talk of raising the bar even higher and locking in Ukraine's support as part of the long-term plan. These aren't short-term moves. Once troops are based, money is allocated, and factories are running, the alliance isn't going to back out easily. There's also a supply race happening behind the scenes. The United States and its European allies are working fast to keep Ukraine supplied with enough missiles and high-tech weapons, and they're even finding new ways to pay for it so nothing gets held up. Meanwhile, North Korea is now one of Russia's biggest suppliers, sending millions of artillery shells to make up for what Russia can't produce on its own. As Ukraine gets ready to start flying Western fighter jets in the coming months, Russia is building a whole new military branch focused just on drones and is increasing production. It's clear both sides are getting ready for a long war, not just the next battle. The real danger is where all of these things start to overlap. Right now, there are three big flashpoints that keep NATO on edge. First, attacks in Crimea, especially on sites that Russia considers extremely important, could lead to a sudden and harsh response. Second, long-range missile strikes deeper into Russian territory are happening more often, and each one raises the chance of back-and-forth retaliation. Third, If Russia ever strikes a supply route or base inside Ukraine that's clearly tied to the West, NATO leaders would have just hours to decide how to react. None of this is written in any treaty. These are political lines, not legal ones. And political lines can shift at any time. So, here's the contradiction. The West keeps saying it isn't directly involved in the war, and legally, that's still true. But the day-to-day reality looks very different. Military budgets are climbing. Drone factories are running non-stop. New units and weapons are already set up closer to Russia than at any time in recent memory. Europe hasn't been this ready for war in decades. Russia sees this as a threat. Many European governments call it protection. And now we face the hardest question. Can diplomacy move faster than all the weapons, troops, and factories that are now spreading across Europe? If the answer is yes, this could end with a deal that stops the front line from moving and avoids something worse. But if the answer is no, then the real warning may not come in a headline. It might be the quiet sounds we don't notice, the buzz of drones in the dark, the hum of new weapons plants, signals that something much bigger is already on its way. Thanks for watching. See you in our next video.